Welcome back to the Automation Podcast. My name is Shawn Tierney from Insights, and this week on the show, I meet back up with John DeTellem of Siemens to learn all about what's new in TIA Portal version 21. Now, before we jump into that, I do have one short announcement, and that is to thank this week's guest, Siemens, for sponsoring this episode and helping underwrite some of our costs to produce it. In an appreciation for the sponsorship, we're releasing it on all platforms ad-free, and we're also including some helpful links to this week's topic in the description. That said, let's go ahead now and jump right into this week's episode of the Automation Podcast and learn about what's new in TIA Portal version 21. John, welcome back to the show. I'm excited to learn about what's new in TIA Portal. But for anybody who hasn't watched, I mean, we've done so many episodes together over the years, but for anybody who's new to the show, would you just take a moment to tell them who you are?
Yeah, John DeTellem. I'm with Siemens, of course, and my primary focus has been the engineering software. The TI Portal is one of those key components. And yeah, I come here a lot to focus on the concepts of the engineering software for the PLCs. And of course, we have my other counterparts that do the HMI and the drives and the other products as well. But generally, I focus on the TI Portal and the overall arching engineering software.
Yeah, and I was looking back at the previous episodes we did, and they're some of the most popular Siemens episodes we've done, right? And so I thank you for coming back on and to bring us up to speed. And I believe TIA Portal V21, did that release in the fall or the winter?
Fundamentally, November, December, some of the stuff was published, available for download or delivered to customers on annual agreements in December and into January. So yeah, it was fundamentally announced at the SPS Nuremberg in Nuremberg, and all the components and the PLC hardware kind of roll out December, January, February, March, because there's some things that kind of lag after the engineering software. But yeah, I started doing TI Portal Step 7, WinCC, safety, December 5th, I think, when I first had access to it in the cloud. And then I downloaded the DVD one. So yeah, generally what we do is we roll out every year in November, December, January, these core components. TI Portal's the overall arching framework and everything sits within it. One of the key components that your followers use is the Step 7 for the PLC engineering, together with the safety, PLC Sim Advanced, and of course, WinCC for the HMIs, Synamics for the start drive. And that's kind of what I'll focus on today is those key components. But all the other components also get revisions related to the rollout at the end of the year, basically every year to kind of bring forward some new enhancements and functionalities that benefit our users, our customers in the field. Okay?
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited to learn about what's new.
Yeah, so I'll focus a little bit on TI Portal, Step 7, some safety, PLC Sim Advanced, VCI, just as a hint, and then some overview of that. But again, I like to make sure customers have the perspective, they're going to purchase a Step 7 professional for the PLCs or WinCC for the HMI, comes with start drive. And then once they do that installation, it becomes the overall software of TIA Portal. And of course, like what we're focused on today, different from all the other podcasts that you can find in your thing in the past. I mean, we go back quite a few years to V17, I think. They're still all there, but the V21 just released, and this is what it looks like. So of course, I play around in the real software. I do demonstrations for customers. I tweak into the new features, but this is my view of my demo project that's based on some hardware. This is real hardware in this case. We've got the engineering copilot for TI Portal. I'll mention that at the end, as a little icon reminder there, but all the other components that are built in. But the cool is a system-centric approach. That's what we're doing with when you look at TI Portal. My project file is a project file of the automation devices required for a solution. So I could have multiple PLCs, multiple HMIs, a slew of I/O that's bridged across to the PLCs and drives. This is a small little factor. But this is what's kind of cool about the perspective of Siemens and Somatic and TI Portal is a system-centric approach that brings the benefits of uniform usability and consistent database for the whole automation solution.
Now, I want to say
This,
something here for those who are listening. You're going to like it because it looks just like version 20. So don't think like it's this brand new interface and it's totally different. I'm looking at this and I'm like, ah, I feel so comfortable. It's the same user interface we all, have learned to love and use over the years with Siemens. So it's not some major redo. It looks very similar to 20 and 19 and 18 and 17 and so on. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to let the audience know that you haven't like totally changed the user interface. It's what we're very comfortable with using today.
yeah, and that's a very big point that I wanted to bring up in one of our tech tips that we're going to do in the next couple weeks or a month. But yeah, the cool part is I can download V21, I can upgrade my V19 or V18, and it's still all fundamentally the same core functionality and the same usability. There's not a need to relearn anything because the changes are enhancements to the existing what you're used to over the years. And the cool part is, as we see in some of the tech tips we're going to do, is I can start small and use V21 on my V19 project and still tweak around and click around, but everything stays fundamentally the same except for a few enhancements in the PLC hardware, in some of the functionality that brought forward because of customer feedback, but they're generally, like you said, not impactful to a big level. They're bringing more and more functionality, which is great stuff for our customers as we look into the future, into 2030 and 2040. This is still going to be the beast for doing automation.
Yeah, and there's something about that that's just so positive that, I jump around from 16 to 17 to 18 to 20. And depending, I've done, I don't know, I think I did 20 or 30 Siemens videos last year. And it doesn't matter. Like there's small differences between them, there's new features and, newer stuff you can do with the newest software, but you can be just as efficient, in my opinion, in 16 as you can in 20. And I just love that. But let me turn it back to you.
Absolutely, yeah. Some of the key things that come the reality of why V21. It's the next generation hardware, the some of the functionality in the hardware that customers need, and then some of the enhancements that just take us to concepts that a lot of the automation guys are using. And we'll touch on some of that stuff today. But I pulled out, this is the eye chart of all the things that get documented from all the different components, from the WinCC, the Step 7, the Start Drive, the cloud services. Basically, it's TI Portal in the cloud. And then all these options, like I mentioned before. But every one of the product managers and headquarters, drives some functionality improvement in the yearly releases of these different topics to enhance it for our user experiences so that it gets better for the future. But you're right, it doesn't derail it from a perspective of having to start all over again. So I only picked out a couple highlights on here, and then what I'm hoping to do is in a couple of our tech tips, we help our customers or your followers dig into this deeper on their own. One of the cool things that I've always been adamant about is, why is TI Portal not tracking all the data of the information that I'm changing? And it's a lot of noise if I turn it on at the wrong time. But if my machine is up and running and I'm making a change or two related to enhancement of my machine, changing the block or the PLC, what they allowed is the ability to turn on a log and start filling a file on your computer with some of these things that happen while you're clicking through TI Portal. So this is new in V21, is this log file and the ability to turn on the log and then save it on your local computer as a log file. It's fundamental. It's simple. It's not the elaborate tracking of some of the other systems that are third-party backup and restore, but it is basically fundamentally capturing some of the stuff in TI Portal. And it's the first rendition, so V21. So I think this is going to be something that we see evolve over time with more and more availability of the information that's there, and an ability to manage it so it doesn't become too overwhelming.
Yeah, I think for somebody who's managing a maintenance department, turning that on would be great.
Yep.
Because if Joe is out sick and you're like, well, what did he do yesterday?
Yep.
He can go and look at the log and say, oh, he added that screen or he changed that wrong or whatever he did. So back to you.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is going to be a good thing. I think it's a thing to explore and a thing to give us feedback as to what it's missing or what its capabilities need to be considered for the future. But yeah, I think it's a huge step to the fact that TI Portal knows the mouse click that you've done and what was done to a block, to a PLC tag, to a value in the data value, and the ability to kind of just land that somewhere so that you could filter through it is a great step. So fundamentally, one of the first things I do is try to figure out where it's at and how to do it. But I went in here and I turned on the log changes, turned on my usernames that are set up in user management. And then I just went in and clicked through to make sure that it gave me a change. The cool part is in the log inside the project file, there's a go-to button. That little green arrow is always a help. If you have an error or a message related to a compile of your code, you click on that, it's going to go right to where this object is, so you can see exactly what happened.
Nice.
So I think this is new in V21. This is a good thing for our customers to turn on and explore how it looks and what it gives them, and then how they potentially could use it into some of their management systems and other tools that they're using there. And also our third-party partners that do these kinds of backup and restore systems, accessing this log might also be helpful. Another thing that's pretty significant that we've been working on the last couple of years, based on a lot of feedback from customers and the evolution of version control tools, a continuous integration, continuous development, is a need for our PLC ladder files or function block diagrams or the STL documents to be more user readable. In the past, if I did an export of my TI Portal ladder file, it was XML document and very hard to read and very hard to pull out what the simple logic was behind it. Our development folks have, taken into consideration what users are trying to do with the version control interfaces, with text-based documents, with their own openness tool sets. And they found a way to basically export the document or the ladder file XML. Instead of going to XML as the format, they're saving it as what's called SD, source document. It's kind of a simple name, but fundamentally what they're doing is saving it as simple text. One cool thing about this is if I do this, it's going to be version independent. So you look at this, I can save this off as my ladder file for my interface to my control, my valve or my robot. And when I save that off and I want to replicate it, it's version independent. So there's no versioning built into it. So it will live longer in my evolution of my automation when I use a version 22 or version 23 in the future, because that version data is not inside there. It's just that text. And again, the concept is that we're adhering to some DevOps concepts, continuous integration, continuous development, version management, tracking, source control, all those concepts that you use in the software world. The programmers are evolving or maturing to the concept. I want to do that in the automation world. Well, the good news is you can still do it with TI Portal, and we're building in the tools to enable the source documents to be interfaced to a version control interface and to be managed the same way you do other documents in VS Code and other tool sets. So that's an interesting topic, and a lot of users are using TI Portal with all the tool sets, the libraries, and the other tool sets to manage their projects in the engineering for efficient engineering to be more powerful. This is a big complicated slide that shows the repositories and that kind of stuff that is part of it. And this is a document that we can get into later, or a tech tip that we can talk about later. This is another example of using in one block. I don't know if you could do this, but even if it's a ladder block, I can mix STL together with FBD. And the cool part is now we don't care what you're doing in a ladder block. If I have a function block that's for drive control and it's function block XYZ, I can mix some STL for doing my mathematics for setting up the scaling or the following of the motion control. And then I can use ladder logic for some of the discrete, all in the same single block.
Now, this isn't new, right? You've always been able to have like network 1 be function block, network 2 be SCL, network 3 be ladder. I think what's new here is that you're supporting this in the source document export. Is that am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. In version 20, it was strictly ladder, but in version 21, they've evolved it for the function block diagram and the SCL as well. And now, if customers have this concept of mixed language editors in one block, they can also do this with the source document.
Nice.
And then in the settings of the workspace of TI Portal, now you can set it up so that if you click and export the code, instead of it being XML, you can set it to SD, source document. You can set that so that it goes there. And you see the ones that are still going to be XML, STL, which is a German editor for the old statement list stuff, and graph has got to be XML because it's so complex. But you can see all the other ones that now in v21 support this concept of simple text, readable text. And then this is what the version control interface. Basically, inside my TI Portal framework as an engineer, I have a repository, for example, Git or other, and I want to manage my text code blocks related to the version January XYZ. And this is the version interface that's I think it's been in since D16. And it's evolved with more and more functionality up to where we are now today. So it includes the ability to do library objects, and it now includes the ability to do types. And a type block is where it's a block that's kind of managed like outside the project file, and the versions are tracked in my project library or my global library and applied as a standard type. Cool.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, kind of changing topics. Another cool feature that kind of came through in v21 and related to the new firmware, is right here, firmware 4.1 of the 1500, is the ability, if I have a data block that was set up and running in my production machine, and I set up all the data values for a recipe or for how I want to run the machine. If we're running the machine and doing production for a set period of time, and I went back and I added a variable to that block, in the past, you had to do some steps to ensure that you saved off the running values of the values as into a start value and a reset to ensure that you didn't lose your recipe or your setup values. Well, in version 21, this is a nice enhancement or feature brought forward to overcome that problem or that work process that was in there. And now I can modify a data block, a set of variables, where I modify or add additional variables in that data block, and the running values that exist in the PLC will keep their actual values.
Now, let me ask you about this. So, in the course I teach, I have to really walk through students to make sure they understand this, because in prior to 21, you had to do this beforehand. In your project, you have to say in your data block, keep actual values, and it assigns some memory for that. And you may have to update that over time if you didn't assign enough memory to begin with. So what you're saying here is that this is a different way of doing it, where if I make a change and then I want to download it, it will give me the choice to keep actual values. Am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly. Yep.
That's very cool. Yeah.
So the one thing about the data blocks that contains our variables for the process, the one thing that was done inside Siemens different than some of the other guys is the setup of an initial value or a start value. So I build the machine and I set up the control for a station or a motor or a valve, and I know the values of certain variables that represent how it should always start up after a shutdown or a reset, so that those values are initialization values or startup values, so that I know my machine is going to run the way I engineered it. And in the world of Siemens, that's known as the start value or the initial value. And basically on my machine is all hosed up. I don't know what the maintenance guys did with some of the values. I put it to stop, or I power cycle it and I start it back up. And the good news is I know that my start values are going to reinitialize to what was engineered for the system.
Without having to have a separate routine that does the initialization, which is what we would do in other PLCs. We would have to have a startup routine that says, we're starting up, let's reinitialize everything. But then on the flip side, we have a lot of instances where the operator is like he's the brain trust behind the machine and he puts all the information in through the HMI. And so we don't want to lose those values because like what if he's on vacation and nobody knows the secret sauce to all those values? So we want to avoid making especially an online edit. If you take an old copy and download it, we always expect something bad to happen, or potentially happen. But if somebody's making an online change, they're going to fix something. You want to be cognizant of, hey, will this erase all the values that were entered in the HMI? And
Exactly.
that's where something like this just gives me another way to avoid that.
Correct. Yep. 100%. Yeah. This is 100% the big benefit of the new firmware 4.1 and the version 21 is that in a production environment, the operator, the maintenance guy makes a change to a data block, adds a variable. He has the option to keep the values. 100%.
Nice.
Another cool feature that's kind of evolved to V18, V19, V20 is the safety validation assistant and tool set. And it's kind of based on the concept that, again, all the components that are related to an e-stop or a contactor or a drive safe, a torque off, are all part of the devices that are in my automation solution because I'm doing everything inside TI Portal. So I have the I/O, the e-stop represented in my hardware configuration on Profinet or wired to an I/O point. I have my evaluation logic in my PLC, and I have my outputs or my drive all connected into TI Portal. So some of our smart application engineers in headquarters has identified the ability to kind of write a little script to monitor the status of something that might be the e-stop or the safety gate related to the detect, what we intend that should be done when that happens, and how to verify what the output does in the end result. So the safety validation assistant was evolved in V20 and V21. It's in the project tree. It's a cross-functional device because it allows me to pull input data from wherever the e-stop might exist and check how it's being controlled and then monitor what's happening to my output device. So it allows me to write a safety validation against what my safety expectations are for the system. So it basically works on the 1500s, the 1200s, and the G2. It is fundamentally based on, the concept of wherever I can get the input data, evaluate the results, and then determine what's going on there. And I basically write a little test, and it will validate my safety function outside the PLC code. And it generates a document, and it provides me a way of validating a safety function on my automation system before I start production. And then I can save that off in the library. I can save that off in exported tool sets. And then 6 months from now or a year from now, when somebody makes a change, I can run that test again to make sure that they didn't disrupt my expectation of the safety. So this is a cool tool set that I kind of feel like everybody should be evaluating if it gives them a secondary way of validating a safety function in their tool set to ensure that it remains as expected in the functionality that was intended in a process in their world. And this is another thing that we could do as a tech tip later on.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody out there who's using fail-safe controllers to CPUs. Let us know. Run through this and let us know what you think. I don't do, being an instructor or and a YouTuber, I don't do a lot of safety, but I'd love to know what the people out there in the field think of this. So back to you, John.
Yep, absolutely. The other new key thing is the next generation S1200. You've got some of the first generation stuff there in your lab and your training. But last year in January, Luis Navarez launched this second generation. It's kind of a redesigned hardware of the 1200. It's intended to go longer into the future with the 1500s. The objective is smaller footprint, less DIN rail for those types of critical small spaces that these kind of devices fit into. And then the other key core to the actual functionality running in the PLC is that it is truly more of a full-blown 1500 inside than it is of what was the Gen 1 S7 1200 that was a little bit different. So this is what it looks like. It's a little bit, I think, taller off the DIN rail, a little bit bigger this way, but the intent is to be a smaller footprint when it's mounted. There's these signal boards that allow you to expand this compact CPU beyond the I/O points that are there. So I can add a signal board here that gives me more functionality, and then you've got your modules that sit there. Now this device, there's a couple new ones at 1216 and 1217, and then of course it's got Profinet built in, and it can connect to ET200SP remote I/O or anything else that's on Profinet and be a scanner just like anything else.
Yeah, I would say to anybody out there using the original S7 1200, which is a great small PLC, definitely check out. We had Lewis on. He did a physical tour. I did an unboxing. Lewis went through the detailed slides. There's two of those. There's like the preview slides, which we did a long time ago, but the latest version of that was the detailed final slides. So definitely want to recommend anybody who's want to look at the G2, check it out. We have plenty of content on it. And this page shows what's new in version 4.1.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, and 4.1, the G2 just got released earlier this week. So I'm just now going to try and get my hands on that firmware on the support side. But yeah, the OPC UA, this is cool about our PLCs is, it's truly a setup inside the hardware. It's not a third-party device or secondary device slapped on the backplane of the PLC. It's actually built into the controllers, server and client. Web pages are powerful. I got a slide on that. Motion control is a big topic. What's new in v21 and the PLC Sim Advanced is the 1200. G2 is now supported in PLC Sim Advanced. There's a app, Near Field Communications, that you see the little symbol on the front of the PLC. And then some of the other functionalities coming around in the PLC. Now, some of the hardware modules that are related to the G2, specifically like fail-safe I/O modules for the G2 planned for May of 2026, so later this year. But you can still do safety with the ET200SP if that's how you want to start. Web pages are really a cool thing. You can set them up so that the user, even though they ping the IP address, they have to log in with some login information. But if you give them the rights on the web pages, this is the kind of a cool thing that you could do either from your workstation. Maybe you don't want to get online with TI Portal, you don't have TI Portal, or you want to access it from your HMI. But there's a slew of read-only diagnostics or information related to the PLC that you can get here without needing TI Portal. And then if you enable some of the right functionality, you can actually reset, run, stop, and do some other functionality. But yeah, fundamentally, the new web pages on the 4.0 are intended to kind of be a new look and feel. And this is another slide that kind of highlights the concepts of the new web pages for the PLCs.
Very cool.
So like I mentioned earlier, the other product managers for the other components around the TI Portal also release a version 21 for the PLC Sim that's built in. PLC Sim is the DVD that comes free with TI Portal Step 7 that allows you to fundamentally simulate the PLC in a simple perspective, the way we've always been able to do it. A PLC Sim Advanced is the tool that's used at a higher level for interfacing to other APIs and other technologies. But the PLC Sim v21 brought some new user functionality for the user that brings more value for using PLC Sim. Instead of using hardware, I can use PLC Sim to test my system. I love the PLC Sim. That's what I fundamentally use, together with the HMI Sim and the stuff that comes around the motion. So there's functionality, new simple user interfaces that evolved in the PLC Sim v21, and PLC Sim Advanced rolled to version 8.0. And in that version 8.0, it also evolved with a lot of enhancements that are related to hardware and other tool sets that are required. Now, with the advanced, of course, it opens up the ability to have open interfaces of my Ethernet port on my PC, or use an API to connect to third-party or Siemens tools that allow me to simulate or do virtual commission software. Another cool thing that's going to be rolled out in the version 8.0 is the ability to kind of simulate the display that you see on the hardware PLC. This display is a very powerful interactive tool set that gives you all the information that's going on with the PLC. And a lot of users have asked, can I get the display somewhere else? Which hasn't ever been evolved. It's basically the web pages that are intended to do that. But now it's going to be possible to kind of use it in the PLC Sim Advanced as well. Another cool thing that's kind of come out is the documentation, the how-to, the help. There's a new online view of the docs documentation, the help files that allows you to get to some more tutorial videos, some overviews of what's new. And those are pretty powerful tools that you can use to also evaluate what's new in TI Portal v21. So I always go to the what's new and the help. So,
okay. Yep.
And then I drive down to there. Let me share one of my screens real quick. Yeah, so here's what I mentioned a minute ago is the docs, TI Portal Cloud. You can get to this without an installation of TI Portal, but it's TIA, TI Portal. It's all online. I'll get you this link so you can publish it as well. What I use is that docu folder, and I'll send you the link to that or this, and I'll go read in more clarity the definition of what's new in v21. What's cool about this is you can go back to the other versions and see what was new in v21 and get a perspective of what was gone in the back. I'll also jump to the sales and delivery release real quick and show you kind of, how that's structured. This is the support site in our Siemens portal, and it highlights, the concept of what was released in v21. There's the detailed slides that I'm kind of going through here, so anyone can download those. It's about 300 slides because of the detail of it. And then this is where you can get to the specifics of the details related to Step 7, or what was detailed in the release of Step 7. And this is where you can get to the trial download of downloading the software. This is where I usually send our customers to go and get DVD number 1 and download this TI Portal Step 7 Safety WinCC version 21. And this will give them the basics of TI Portal because it's all inclusive. And then, like we always try to promote is, get the PLC Sim.
Absolutely.
When you see PLC Sim version 21, this is the free unlicensed, and this will allow you to simulate PLC, the HMI, and the start, and basically do what most of us want to do.
Yeah.
And then if you want to do more enhanced, then you can do a trial of the PLC Sim Advanced. What's significant is every one of these things supports about a 21-day trial. When you download it, activate Step 7 or WinCC, gives you a chance to get the licenses.
Which is great for students who just, they want to go through and do all their labs. Maybe they have a license at work, but maybe they're learning at home. And so it's great that they can just go up there, grab a 21-day when they're ready to do their labs. Don't do it before. You can't reset that 21 days. But when they're done the course and like, all right, I'm going to do my hands-on, they can go get a trial for home. And of course, they could do that with the cloud too. They don't actually have to download and install it on their home PC, right? They could do a trial in the cloud as well, as we've covered on the show previously.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So that might be a tech tip that we show, hey, how to get started with TI Portal, that I was thinking that we would do in the next week or so. One of the key things to help. Of course, this is another tech tip that we talked about doing was, making an upgrade to v21. The v21 will open anything as far back as v14. So I just basically select the project and it's going to do this little upgrade. I just did a test to see before I installed Start Drive that I needed to make the installation of the Start Drive because my project had drives in it. But that was no big deal. I installed Start Drive and then I was able to complete the upgrade. But that's another topic that I think we can do as a little effective is how easy is it to upgrade on my v21?
And if you have a v21 license, that license is good for v20 and v19 and v18 and so on, right?
Correct. Yep.
So if you're upgrading from 15 or 16 or 17 to 21, you'll also have a license that works with all the previous versions down to, is it V14 or is it V16? I know that license goes back so far.
For step 7, it'll go back to V11. So yeah, if I'm a user and I have TI Portal V19 on my computer, my projects are V19, my license is V19. Right now, let's say that I just do the installation of V21 and I upgrade my licenses, my V19, step 7, my V19 WinCC and safety will upgrade to a V21 license. And when I launch V19, it will still see that V21 license as licensing for my V19.
Nice.
And same with basically step 7 goes back to V11. WinCC Unified goes back to V16 when Unified was introduced. So there's some differences in some of those things, but our objective is that a user that's running a machine at V19 can upgrade his workstation to V21, upgrade his licenses to V21, and he can still work in V19 on the machine and do everything that he still needs to do with his equipment. And then he could work on a new PLC, an add-on somewhere else that is using the latest and greatest stuff.
Yeah, that means too, if you have a plant full of V18 and you need one more license, that license is going to work on a new laptop on V18 as well as V21.
Yep.
So
exactly.
it's just a way. It's very well thought through.
Yeah, exactly. So I do get that exact same thing where, hey, I want V18. I need a new installation. I need a new license. I'm like, buy V21. The license will work for V18. You can download V18 on our support site. So I tried to keep this to a short minimum so that it was digestible by your audience. Like you and I talk about, there's some tech tip topics that we could break into. These are just some of my suggestions that we do in the next, that I think will, how to get started, with the cloud or the DVD-1, DVD PLC sim. You and I talked about upgrading the licensing. So in the case you're a user that has a V16 step 7, a V16 WinCC unified, what does that look like when I get an upgrade license and how do I upgrade it? Project update. And then some of these other topics that we can talk about in a minute.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what we'll try to do too is include that link to the full slide deck because I know some of you out there are going to want to know every gory detail to see how it can help you in your day to day. So we'll try to include that in the description as well, since it's published and it's available on their website, as we saw in the previous slide. So that's pretty awesome. And really appreciate you coming back on, John, to do this. I know the audience really loves to know what's new and what's happening and what new features are available. And that was a pretty good list you put together.
Yeah. A couple more things just before I sign off. Our Somatic PG, our laptop computer, these are pretty powerful. These are pretty nice. I think you have the old M6. These things are leaner, tighter, smaller. And actually, last night when I left the restaurant, it fell out of my truck and it survived, hit the ice and snow, and it just slipped over the top of the clothes that I had in the back of the truck. But it landed on its edge and it still works today. But what's cool about that is it's the MD57A, Somatic PG, I call it, but it does deliver with V21. And then the other two topics, I don't know, have you met Kristen Quasi?
We had Kristen on to go over industrial computers.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And she was the IPC. She's now kind of taken over a new role related to our next gen topics. So this is her and I working together, MIA, last May, looking into the crystal ball into the future. So I talked to her about getting on the call to talk about our industrial co-pilot for engineering for TI Portal.
Oh yeah, great.
So we'll do that in the next month or two, and then the next generation is going to be the Somatic AX tool set that gives users that want to be in that VS Code editor the ability to code in a different way than what they do today with TI Portal. But there'll be an overlap. Thanks, Shawn. I really appreciate the time to kind of just give your folks an overview and then how to go out there. I'll send you the links on how to get to more information so that they can learn more about it. And they can always reach out to us on, your email, your social media, or LinkedIn.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I try to check that at least every day or two. I appreciate everybody who puts questions up there on any of the platforms. Really appreciate you guys. I do try to check them and, find answers when I can. But in any case, John, thank you again for coming on the show and bringing us up to speed on TIA Portal V21. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I want to thank John again for taking time out of his busy schedule to come on the show and bring us up to speed on TIA Portal version 21. I also want to thank John for providing the links in the description. So if you guys want to learn more, they're all right there. I also want to thank Siemens for sponsoring this episode, helping underwrite some of our costs to produce it. And an appreciation, we released it on all platforms ad-free, and of course included those links in the description. That said, I also want to thank you for tuning in this week. You know, if you have any thoughts or comments on this week's episode, please leave them in the comment area wherever you're watching this. And I also want to wish you all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.